Conversation has been going on for a while now. The Bills, their window, how big is it? How much longer do they have? A perennial contender in the AFC for the last handful of years, and going into an offseason where they were well under the cap and had to do a lot of work, including letting go of some fan and team favorites. It has been an interesting offseason for Buffalo. With that, today, I'm diving into my draft preview. I'll do a little bit of a review as to what the Bills have done in free agency, give my thoughts and opinions, but then I'm going to dive into who I would like and or expect to see the Bills targeting going into this year's NFL draft. So let's dive right in.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and as I said, today diving into the Buffalo Bills in my NFL draft preview for them. I'm going to talk, again, a little bit of free agency, and then really get into the nitty-gritty of what I'm looking at as far as Buffalo Bills and the draft. But as always, I'd like to invite you, Bills fans, comment down below. Want to hear your thoughts and opinions on the matter. How do you think they did in free agencies, or anything else you'd like to see them do? On top of that, what are you expecting from them in the draft? And right before we jump in, just as a reminder, recently partnered with NFL Shop and Fanatics. If you plan on buying anything from there, feel free to use my links in the description below or the QR code up here. It helps support the channel, and in doing so, will help me potentially earn a promo code to give to you guys to pass on some discounts. So let's dive right in. We'll start with free agency, just kind of do a little bit of a review, take a look at some of the big signings and what have you here. So obviously we'll start with not necessarily the biggest signing, but one that is notable. Mitchell Trubisky coming back to Buffalo. He will be playing backup to Josh Allen here. Mitchell Trubisky sounded very excited to do this. It felt like returning to home for him, and it feels like a logical step in terms of backup quarterback. So it makes a lot of sense. $5 million deal, no biggie. On top of that, we saw big addition at the wide receiver position here. Curtis Samuel signing a 3-year, $30 million contract at about $10 million per year. This makes a lot of logical sense. He is a big play, burn the top off the defense type of guy. That is his MO. And I think with the loss of Gabe Davis, you kind of had to replace that. And in doing so, you found Curtis Samuel. Mac Hollins also joined the unit. A little bit of an older guy. Will be interesting to see how he fits in, but definitely more of a rotational piece I would have to expect. You also have yourselves Deion Dawkins agreeing to a 3-year, $60.5 million extension. Offensive guard David Edwards agreeing to a 2-year extension, so holding on to some offensive linemen. They did a good job on the defensive side of the ball, keeping both AJ Epinesa locked up and Daquan Jones both re-signing on 2-year deals, so a good job there, and especially going into an offseason where there was a lot of questions as to how much was this Bills team going to lose, being so heavily under the cap here. But between those two guys, you also kept Nicholas Morrow. Teron Johnson signed a nice 3-year deal. On top of that, you kept Taylor Rapp, Cam Lewis, so you did a solid job keeping a large majority of players within your roster. Obviously, the big loss that we were looking at as far as a safety tandem is concerned, both Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde no longer with the team. We'll see what ends up happening there going down the road here. So that is kind of the big question mark as far as the back end of the defense is concerned. But I've got to say, overall, I'm really impressed with the way Buffalo was able to retain as many players as they did and not really take as big of a loss as I think a lot of people anticipated, because there was so much conversation on that window for the playoffs. And is it finally closing because they're going to lose so much this offseason? I think they did a really good job mitigating losses where they could, and also keeping guys from adding even more to that loss column there. So great work free agency wise. Really impressed with what Buffalo did. Now that takes us to the draft and kind of how I'm looking at things for them going forward. I have 3 positions/players I'm going to discuss in specific that I would either like or expect to see this team target. As I said, I invite you to do the same here. You may or may not disagree. That's fine. But this first one here, I'm very curious to hear the reaction, because it's probably not the most popular one, but it is one that I think, based off of the signing of Curtis Samuel, becomes a little bit more important and takes precedence over wide receiver. And that's going to be the cornerback position. You lost Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson during this offseason. And don't get me wrong, I like Christian Benford, I like Rasul Douglas, but they don't scream at number 1 corners in my opinion. You also have Kyer Elam, who's had a bit of a rocky situation so far the last couple of years. I think Buffalo needs to go and target a legit cornerback 1 in the first round. And I think there's a possibility you can do so just staying put at number 28. I've seen the mock drafts prior to free agency. A lot of people were targeting wide receivers, and I feel like depending on who you talk to, you got a different wide receiver name, but I saw it. But since then, I have seen a little bit of a trend change, and this was something I was kind of expecting once I saw the signing of Curtis Samuel, and I'm seeing some more drafts come out now. People looking at cornerback, potentially defensive tackle. The focus has kind of shifted to defense, and I like the idea of a corner and someone who I constantly see available between mock drafts from other people and also just a few mock drafts I've run myself is Alabama cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry. Right at number 28. I think there's a possibility he could be available. If he's not, then, we can have that conversation. But I'm expecting there to be a corner available from that top 5 group just because of how the things look offensively and the rumors surrounding how many quarterbacks might go early. You might have an opportunity to get a guy. And I have a feeling McKinstry could be that guy. That being said, at 6 feet, 199 pounds. He's not going to blow you away with the 40 at a 4.55, but not slow, but not fast by any means. Just good, solid speed. This is a guy who has the swagger and the on-field play to turn into a legitimate cornerback one for this team. Scouts praise his awareness up and down the field. Pun intended there. And on top of that, he shows excellent leadership. He was a guy that Nick Saban could count on to get people in position if they were not in the right places they needed to be on that defense, especially for those really, exotic zone coverages that they would run. And he's not afraid to go up and attack the football, whether it's coming down with picks or simply just batting the ball away and contesting catches. He's not afraid to do so. Now, he can be a little too aggressive, and that is something that obviously some young corners kind of struggle with early on in their career. You don't want to get too handsy, draw the attention of the officials, and get the yellow laundry thrown at you. But I do think that he has all of the tools and traits that you can't necessarily teach. Like, you either are a leader or a commander in terms of getting your teammates set up and where they need to be, or you're not. Like, those aren't like traits you really learn. You either have it in you or you don't. And this is a guy that I think could help take on that leadership role going down the road for a secondary that has seen a massive turnover this offseason. We're talking 4 big names that departed from this team in that secondary, and bringing in a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry, who, again, he has the swagger, and that's something you kind of like. He could fit right in with the Sauce Gardners and PS2s of today's day and age in the NFL. He fits that mold, in my opinion. And again, good size, 6 feet, 200 pounds. He's not frail by any means. He can fight on with some of the bigger, stronger receivers. I really like the idea of getting him down in round number 1. Now, next, we'll focus on the very popular, and something I still think is worth addressing in the draft, wide receiver. Now, Curtis Samuel comes in. He's the big play guy. And it's nice that you can kind of step back and rather than feel so pressed to take a wide receiver in the first round because a lot of people are screaming for it, you can look at this draft and go, this is a very deep class. Wide receivers are coming out more and more ready than they ever have this day and age. And you can go into round 2 or round 3 and find somebody that you really like and really think has a bunch of potential that maybe doesn't necessarily need to be the guy right away. You still have Stephon Diggs. I know there's always conversation about whether he's happy or not in Buffalo. I'm not going to get into that. He's still on the roster as far as I'm concerned. That's how I'm operating here. You bring in Curtis Samuel as well. You have like a really nice 1-2 punch there. You can go and get a guy, good size, good numbers, good, whatever it may be, and he doesn't have to be the guy. And the person that I like that you could probably nab in round number 2, most likely, maybe you have to trade up in round 2 to get him. And honestly, I don't think it would cost a lot, especially once you get into the second round. Trades don't have to be that crazy. And the Bills, for what it's worth, are dealing with a ton of extra capital because of compensatory picks. So there's a lot that you can do with rounds 2 and rounds 3 if there's a guy you really like that you think might slip out of that first round. And that's going to be wide receiver out of Oregon, Troy Franklin. At 6'2", 176 pounds, he runs a 4.41 40, 39-inch vertical leap. He's got the explosive big play ability, taller guy, not on the shorter side. I will say 176 pounds, little bit concerning in my opinion. I would like him to just be a little bit bigger here, and I feel like that is something you can work with. If you can get him to put on like 4, 5, 6 pounds of muscle, you don't have to necessarily sacrifice the speed, but you can help increase his durability going up against some of the bigger players you're going to see in the NFL. But rumor has it Buffalo plans on bringing him in for a visit, so clearly they are interested in him as well. And like I said, Stephon Diggs aside, whether he's happy or not, he is someone that can come in. Those are the guys you have on your receiver group as a whole right now. You're looking at Stephon Diggs. You also have yourself Curtis Samuel. I mean, you don't need to worry about him being the guy right away. And when you look at his numbers, he has that big playability, and he's shown steady progression throughout his college playing time. When you look at 2022 and 2023 combined, a whopping 142 receptions, 2,274 yards, 15 touchdowns, and he averaged nearly 16 yards per catch. This is a guy that you can count on as that number 3 role to maybe make an impact, take a little bit of attention away from your 2 big play threats, and over time develop into a guy post potentially Stephon Diggs or whatever ends up happening down the road. He's very agile. He moves really well. Praise for his razor sharp cutting ability when it comes to running his routes, and he's very effortless at high pointing the ball. Scouts are constantly praising him. Everything I've read about him, that gets brought up over and over and over again, and I think that's a very good sign. And again, my only real concern with him is just his weight, which is something that if you throw him in the weight room, feed him a few extra pounds of chicken here or there weekly, you can add that 4, 5, 6 pounds of lean muscle and you're good to go. And you don't have to sacrifice the speed. There's not a ton of difference in terms of 176 and like 182. It's not going to knock a ton of speed off you. Maybe we're talking 0.02 of a second here, which yes, like every inch and every second counts in the NFL, but it's not something that I think is going to demolish his game to put on just a tiny bit of weight. So I'm not too worried about it. And again, I think he brings a ton of boom potential, and for a day 2 selection would be a gold mine to grab for the Bills. And then finally, the third player position that I'm looking at here, interior of the defensive line. Now, I know we talked earlier, and I'm going defense but not safety, about the loss of Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. Obviously, that hurts the defense, without question. That being said, there's still a ton of talent available in free agency, and the market has not really moved very quickly for safeties. And I do think that there are some guys out there that Buffalo could go and target, be it younger guys, maybe with some checkered injury history, Julian Blackman from Indianapolis, or maybe a more veteran leader type of guy, a la Justin Simmons. There's a lot to like about the safety market. It's just a matter of, like, I think the league just kind of figuring out where the money should kind of go and how it's going to be set for this group. But there's so many available safeties in general, not free safeties, safeties in general, that you could probably address that in free agency. This is where I kind of go, okay, in the later rounds, let's look at interior defensive line. Bringing back DaQuan Jones kind of allows you to push this one back a little bit as well, but you still want to find somebody that shows really good size, the intangibles you like, and production that you can value in those later rounds here. And someone that really stood out to me is going to be Northern Iowa defensive lineman Christian Boyd. At 6'4", 317 pounds, he has nearly, and it's one short, but 1,200 snaps total split between playing in both the A and B gaps. This is someone who can swallow up plays as a run defender. He had a pass rush win rate of 16.4%. Scouts constantly praise his very rare explosiveness off the snap. It helps him win a lot of those battles when it comes to passing plays. And in 2023, he had his most productive season to date in terms of pressures, sacks, and just being able to create havoc for opposing offensive lines. You obviously have the concern of him coming from a smaller school. It is something to worry about. He's facing lesser competition. But again, we're talking day 3 selection type of guy. You're probably getting him in the 4th and 5th round, something along those lines there that you bring in. He's developing behind 2 very capable guys in Ed Oliver and DaQuan Jones. Great guys he can learn from there. Obviously, your edges are solidified with Epinesa and Von Miller. So there's a lot of great talent that he can learn a lot of things from. Even if he's not playing those specific positions, having a guy like Von Miller, great person to learn from, a lot of experience, championship mentality. He could maybe learn a thing or two from him. Like, there's a lot of brains he can pluck from, where I think that's his technique game and just kind of the specific moves that he's going to run with in the NFL. Great players to work with and adopt ideas from for him to become a pro caliber type of guy. Even if he doesn't end up being a full-blown starter, he could be a guy who's very effective in a rotational type of role. He's not the answer to the interior of the defensive line, but you don't necessarily need the answer for it right now. So I think he's a good quality guy to chase after. And that's kind of just what I'm rolling in my head as far as the Buffalo Bills are concerned. So Bills fans, I invite you all, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts on my opinions. And also let me hear what your opinions are on free agency, the draft, all of that. Would love to discuss with you all. But that is it for me. As always, made it to the end. I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.